Neela stood motionless in the preparation chamber, her azure skin glowing faintly in the dim light of the transport vessel. The ceremonial attire they dressed her in felt restrictive, layers of intricately woven silver fabric designed to emphasize her alien nature rather than conceal it. She flexed her six-fingered hands, watching the bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin pulse with her irritation. "Remember your duty," Officer Jevic said, his voice hollow through the chamber's comm system. "You represent the Etherian collective now." Duty, the word had lost meaning to Neela long ago. Born into the warrior caste of her species, she'd served dutifully for 97 cycles as an elite guardian, only to be relegated to diplomatic grunt work after questioning a superior's tactics during the Outer Reach conflicts. Now, she was being sent to Earth as part of what the High Council euphemistically called the Exchange Protocol. What they didn't say aloud, but everyone knew, was that this was punishment disguised as diplomacy. "The human male has been informed of the ceremonial nature of the arrangement," Jevic continued, adjusting Neela's elaborate headdress. "The duration is set for 30 Earth cycles, after which you will return for reassignment." "And the purpose of this exchange?" Neela asked, though she already knew the answer. Jevic's 4 eyes blinked asymmetrically, a sign of amusement among their kind. "Official purpose? Cultural integration research. Actual purpose. The Council finds it entertaining to watch a warrior adapt to domestic human life. Consider it a behavioral study." Or a humiliation ritual, Neela thought but didn't say. The Etherian collective had made first contact with Earth just 11 years ago, and though formal diplomatic relations existed, many among her kind viewed humans as emotionally undisciplined, technologically primitive, and physically unimpressive. "The human's name is Finn Walker," Jevic said, handing her a small data pad. 35 Earth years, former search and rescue specialist, now coordinates supply chains for remote settlements. No living family, suitable isolation for our purposes. Neela skimmed the profile displayed on the screen. The human male had a weathered face, dark hair threaded with gray, and eyes that held something she recognized from her own reflection: loss. "Why would he agree to this?" she asked. "Compensation," Jevic replied simply. "Humans are predictably motivated by resource acquisition." The vessel shuddered as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Neela's body automatically adjusted to the gravitational shift, her dense musculature compensating without conscious effort. She steeled herself for what was to come, a month-long performance for the amusement of her superiors. "Remember, Neela," Jevic said as the landing sequence initiated, "complete submission to this assignment is your only path to rehabilitation within the collective." The transport touched down with barely a tremor. Jevic gestured toward the exit ramp, which was already beginning to lower. "Your human awaits." Neela stepped onto the ramp, her ceremonial robes catching the sunlight, sending prisms of light dancing across the landing pad. Below, a single figure stood waiting, arms crossed over his chest, his face partially shadowed by the brim of a simple cap. Finn Walker looked smaller in person than in his profile. Not frail, he had the solid build of someone who worked with his hands, but certainly not imposing by Etherian standards. As she descended, his eyes widened, tracking her movements with unmistakable apprehension. "Welcome to Earth," he said when she reached the bottom, his voice deeper than she'd expected. "I'm Finn." "I am Neela of House Talai's, 4th Guardian Division," she replied formally, performing the traditional Etherian greeting, a shallow bow with palms displayed outward to show she carried no weapons. "I am assigned to you for 30 cycles according to the exchange protocol." Finn's forehead creased. "Right, the protocol. Look, they didn't give me much detail about this arrangement, just that I'd be hosting an Etherian diplomat and getting paid well for my trouble." Behind her, the transport's engines hummed to life again. Jevic wouldn't be staying. No one wanted to witness what they assumed would be her degradation firsthand. "We should proceed to your dwelling," Neela said, ignoring the departing ship. "I require orientation to your environmental parameters." Finn's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. "You always talk like that." "Like what?" "Like you swallowed a technical manual." Neela blinked her large, iridescent eyes. "I communicate with precision." He shrugged and gestured toward a rugged ground vehicle parked nearby. "Well, my dwelling is about 30 minutes from here. Hope you don't mind trucks." The human's transport was primitive but functional. Neela settled into the passenger seat, her ceremonial attire crinkling uncomfortably against the worn fabric. As they pulled away from the landing site, she observed Finn surreptitiously. His hands were scarred, with calluses that spoke of manual labor. His profile revealed a strong jaw, a twice-broken nose, and lines around his eyes that suggested he'd once smiled more than he did now. "So," he said after several minutes of silence, "want to tell me what this is really about? Because the payment they offered seems excessive for babysitting an ambassador." Neela considered her options. The council expected her to maintain the pretense, but something about this human's directness appealed to her. "My people find amusement in dispatching a warrior to play at domestic life with a human," she said flatly. "They call it cultural exchange. In reality, it is punishment for my insubordination and a form of entertainment for my superiors." Finn glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. "Well, damn, appreciate the honesty." "And you," Neela asked, "why accept such an arrangement?" His hands tightened on the steering mechanism. "Money's good. My old search and rescue cabin needed repairs after the forest fires last year. This covers it and then some." They drove in silence for several more minutes before he added, "Plus, it's been quiet, too quiet since—" He didn't finish the thought. The landscape changed as they drove, transitioning from the flat expanse near the landing zone to rolling hills covered in vegetation. Eventually, they turned onto a narrow dirt path that wound through tall trees before opening to reveal a modest dwelling constructed primarily of wood, an unusual building material by Etherian standards. "Home sweet home," Finn said, bringing the vehicle to a stop. "It's not much, but it's private, no neighbors for miles." Neela exited the truck, taking in the rustic structure and the surrounding forest. The air was dense with moisture and organic compounds, so different from the sterile environments of Etherian habitats. "Come on," Finn said, retrieving her single containment unit from the vehicle's storage compartment. "I'll show you around." The interior of the dwelling was unexpectedly welcoming. Open spaces, natural materials, large transparencies that allowed light to filter through. It smelled of wood and something Neela couldn't identify. "Coffee," Finn explained when she inquired. "Earth's greatest contribution to the galaxy, despite what your people might think." He showed her to a small room with a sleeping platform and storage units. "Guest rooms yours, bathrooms across the hall, kitchen's open, anything else you need, just ask." Neela set down the few possessions she'd brought and removed her ceremonial headdress with relief. The exchange protocol documentation indicated this arrangement simulates a mating pair bond, she said clinically. "What expectations do you have regarding this aspect?" Finn nearly choked on his breath. "Excuse me. I was instructed this assignment mimics a human marriage ceremony. I am inquiring about your expectations." His face flushed with color, a fascinating physiological response Neela had read about but never witnessed so vividly. "Look, I don't know what they told you, but that's not what I signed up for. This is a hosting arrangement. You stay here, I get paid, we both go about our lives. No, mating pair anything." Interesting, Neela thought. Either the human was not informed of the full parameters, or her superiors had been deliberately misleading. Given her recent experiences with the council, she suspected the latter. "I see," she said. "That is a relief." Finn's expression softened slightly. "Look, I don't know what game your people are playing, but while you're here, this is just two people sharing a space. No ceremonies, no protocols, just living. Think you can handle that, warrior?" For the first time since receiving her assignment, Neela felt something other than resentment. This human was straightforward in a way her own kind rarely were. "Yes," she said, "I believe I can handle that." The following days established a tentative routine. Finn rose early, consumed alarming quantities of coffee, and departed for his coordination work at the regional supply hub. Neela used these solitary hours to maintain her physical disciplines, practicing combat forms in the clearing behind the cabin and studying Earth's cultural databases. She was surprised when, on the fourth day, Finn returned earlier than usual, carrying packages of sustenance. "Thought we could try something," he said, setting down containers on the food preparation surface. "You've been eating those nutrient packs your people sent, but they look about as appetizing as vacuum-sealed dirt." Neela approached cautiously. Etherian physiology requires specific nutritional compositions. "Yeah, I checked with the exchange contact. Your people can eat most Earth proteins and plants. You just need to avoid certain acids. He opened containers, releasing aromas that made Neela's olfactory receptors flare. Thought you might want to try something with actual flavor. The meal he prepared was simple by human standards: grilled protein from an aquatic creature, vegetation heated in oils, and small grains. Neela watched his movements, noting the ease with which he navigated the preparation process. You prepare sustenance frequently, she observed. I live alone in the woods, he replied with a slight smile. Had to learn to cook or starve. When they sat to consume the meal, Neela was unprepared for the sensory experience. Etherian nutrition was efficient, calibrated, and entirely without pleasure. This was chaotic, complex, overwhelming. She searched for an adequate description, intense. Finn's eyes crinkled at the corners. Good intense or bad intense? Neela took another bite, analyzing the experience. Unexpected, but not unpleasant. That evening marked a shift. Finn began teaching her about Earth cuisine, explaining ingredients and methods with surprising patience. Neela found herself cataloging his reactions, nodding when his expressions softened, when the tension in his shoulders eased. A week into her stay, she discovered him on the dwelling's exterior platform. Deck, he called it, staring at the night sky with a glass of amber liquid. The exchange documentation warned of human intoxicants, she said, stepping outside. Finn snorted. Just whiskey, one glass won't kill me. Neela settled into the adjacent seating unit, her gaze following his to the stars. Your atmosphere obscures the clarity of the celestial view. That's one way of looking at it. He took a sip from his glass. Another is that the haze makes the stars seem more mysterious, more worth reaching for. She considered this perspective, an irrational but interesting viewpoint. They sat in silence for several minutes before Finn spoke again. Why were you really sent here, Neela? What kind of insubordination gets a warrior packed off to babysit a human? The question was direct, but his tone held no accusation. Neela found herself answering truthfully. I questioned an order during a territorial dispute. My unit was instructed to neutralize a settlement that had violated Etherian boundaries. The inhabitants were a nomadic species, unlikely to understand the demarcations. She stared at her hands. I suggested diplomatic contact before lethal force. My commander disagreed. And I refused to fire. The words felt heavy. The commander relieved me of duty. The council determined I suffered from emotional contamination, a condition they believe humans exemplify, hence my assignment here. Finn was quiet for so long that Neela wondered if she had violated some human conversational protocol. Finally, he said, You did the right thing. Such a simple statement, yet Neela felt something shift inside her, a tightness she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten it was there. The collective would disagree, she replied. Then the collective is wrong. He finished his drink. Sometimes systems need people who question them, otherwise they just keep making the same mistakes. Neela studied this human who spoke of defiance so casually. Among her people, such talk was dangerous, seditious. Yet here in the dim light of Earth's moon, it felt like truth. Later that night, as she performed her evening meditation, Neela realized something disturbing. Just 7 days into her 30-day assignment, and already Earth, this house, this human, was beginning to feel dangerously comfortable. Officer Jevic had been right about one thing: this assignment would change her, but perhaps not in the way the council had intended. 2 weeks into her stay on Earth, Neela found herself fascinated by rain. On Etheria, precipitation was regulated, scheduled, utilitarian, designed to maintain optimal atmospheric conditions and nothing more. Here, it was wild and unpredictable, sometimes gentle and sometimes fierce, transforming the world outside Finn's cabin with each passing hour. She stood at the large transparency window, she reminded herself, watching droplets trace erratic patterns down the glass while thunder rumbled in the distance. The sound resonated in her chest cavity, not unlike the ceremonial war drums of her people, yet somehow more primal. Never seen rain before? Finn asked, appearing beside her with 2 steaming mugs. Not like this. Etherian atmospherics are controlled. He offered her one of the mugs, tea, not coffee. She had made her dislike for coffee quite clear after her first attempt left her vibrating with what Finn called caffeine jitters for nearly 6 hours. You control your weather? he asked, leaning against the window frame. Why am I not surprised? Efficiency, Neela replied, accepting the mug. Unpredictability leads to chaos. And chaos leads to, what, fun, creativity, adventure. She sipped the tea, appreciating the subtle flavors she was learning to distinguish. The collective views chaos as wasteful, dangerous. Finn gestured toward the storm outside. Look at that and tell me something beautiful isn't worth a little danger. Neela watched lightning fork across the sky, illuminating the forest in a momentary flash of brilliant light. On Etheria, such displays would be considered atmospheric malfunction, requiring immediate correction. Here it was spectacular. The forest near my birthplace had illumination patterns, she said, surprising herself with the personal disclosure. Bioluminescent flora that pulsed in synchronized waves during the third moon's ascension. They were removed during infrastructure expansion. Finn glanced at her, something like sympathy crossing his features. Sounds like you've lost some beauty in the name of efficiency, too. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the storm. Neela noticed how the rain transformed the landscape, deepening colors, creating new pathways as water flowed downhill, bringing forth scents from the earth she hadn't detected before. I want to experience it, she decided suddenly. The rain, it's coming down pretty hard. Precisely, I wish to feel its unpredictability. Finn studied her for a moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. Well, who am I to stand between a warrior and new experiences? Minutes later, they stood on the deck, the overhang providing minimal shelter as Neela studied the curtain of water just steps away. She wore one of Finn's oversized shirts over her standard-issue bodysuit, the soft fabric hanging loose on her frame despite her height. You sure about this? Finn asked, eyebrows raised. Your fancy Etherian tech might not appreciate a soaking. Neela removed the monitoring bracelet that transmitted her biometric data back to the collective. Some experiences are not meant for official records, she said, placing it carefully inside. Then, without hesitation, she stepped into the downpour. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, cold water striking her skin from all directions, soaking through fabric, plastering her short silver-blue hair to her scalp. Neela spread her arms wide, tilting her face toward the sky, allowing the rain to stream over her features. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin flared in response, pulsing with bright cobalt light that shone through her wet clothing. She turned to find Finn watching her, still sheltered under the overhang, an unreadable expression on his face. You're glowing, he said, voice barely audible over the rain. Autonomic response, she explained. Heightened sensation triggers bioluminescence. It's beautiful. The simple statement caught her off guard. Beauty was not a concept applied to warriors in the collective. Efficiency, lethality, precision, these were the qualities valued in her caste. Beauty belonged to the aesthetic divisions, those bred for diplomacy and ceremony. You should join me, she called, surprising herself again. Experience the unpredictability. Finn hesitated only briefly before stepping into the rain beside her. Water immediately darkened his hair and soaked his clothing, but he laughed, a sound Neela had heard rarely during her stay. Been a while since I played in the rain, he admitted, blinking water from his eyes. Neela didn't fully understand the concept of playing, but something about the freedom of the moment, the shared experience of sensation without purpose or efficiency, resonated deeply. On impulse, she splashed her foot in a puddle, sending water arcing toward Finn. He froze, droplets streaming down his surprised face, before his expression shifted to something challenging. Oh, it's like that, is it? What followed was an education in human water recreation, splashing, impromptu puddle jumping, and something Finn called rain dancing, that involved spinning with arms outstretched until dizziness set in. Neela's warrior reflexes gave her certain advantages, but Finn's familiarity with the concept of play evened the field. By the time they retreated inside, both were thoroughly soaked, and to Neela's surprise, she was breathless with something approximating laughter, a sound she couldn't remember making since early childhood, before her training began. You should do that more often, Finn said, tossing her a dry cloth for her hair. Get wet. Laugh, it suits you. Neela felt an unfamiliar warmth that had nothing to do with the tea. Finn, prepared to ward off the chill. The incident in the rain marked a turning point. Neela began to approach her time on Earth differently, not as punishment to be endured, but as an opportunity to experience sensations and emotions long suppressed by her training. Finn, seemingly sensing this shift, began introducing her to more Earth experiences. They hiked forest trails where Neela marveled at the chaotic yet harmonious growth patterns of unregulated plant life. They visited a small settlement, town, Finn corrected, where Neela observed humans interacting in bewildering but fascinating ways. Each experience was catalogued, analyzed, and increasingly simply enjoyed. Finn, too, was changing. The quiet, reserved human who had greeted her upon arrival smiled more frequently now. He spoke of his past more openly, his work in search and rescue, the satisfaction of saving lives, and eventually, the tragedy that had led him to retreat from that world. "We were caught in an avalanche," he explained one evening as they sat before the heating unit Finn called a fireplace. "Standard rescue operation turned nightmare. I got out. My partner didn't." "It wasn't your decision," Neela said, recognizing the shadow of guilt that crossed his features. "No, but I was team lead. The responsibility was mine." He stared into the flames. "After that, I couldn't trust myself with other people's lives anymore, so I switched to logistics, still helping, just from a distance." Neela understood this better than most. "Among my people, failure in duty is unforgivable, but your failure was caring too much, not too little. There is honor in that." Finn looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing something new. "Sometimes I forget you're a warrior under all that blue." "I am always a warrior," she replied, "but perhaps not only a warrior." The admission hung between them, significant in ways Neela couldn't fully articulate. Their days fell into a rhythm unlike anything Neela had experienced, unpredictable yet comfortable, structured yet fluid. Mornings began with parallel exercise routines, Finn with his earth calisthenics, Neela with her combat forms. They prepared and consumed the morning meal together before Finn departed for work. 2 weeks into her stay on Earth, Neela found herself fascinated by rain. On Etheria, precipitation was regulated, scheduled, utilitarian, designed to maintain optimal atmospheric conditions and nothing more. Here, it was wild and unpredictable, sometimes gentle and sometimes fierce, transforming the world outside Finn's cabin with each passing hour. She stood at the large transparency panel, window, she reminded herself, watching droplets trace erratic patterns down the glass while thunder rumbled in the distance. The sound resonated in her chest cavity, not unlike the ceremonial war drums of her people, yet somehow more primal. "Never seen rain before?" Finn asked, appearing beside her with 2 steaming mugs. "Not like this. Etherian atmospherics are controlled." He offered her one of the mugs, tea, not coffee. She had made her dislike for coffee quite clear after her first attempt left her vibrating with what Finn called caffeine jitters for nearly 6 hours. "You control your weather?" he asked, leaning against the window frame. "Why am I not surprised?" "Efficiency," Neela replied, accepting the mug. "Unpredictability leads to chaos. And chaos leads to, what, fun, creativity, adventure." She sipped the tea, appreciating the subtle flavors she was learning to distinguish. The collective views chaos as wasteful, dangerous. Finn gestured toward the storm outside. "Look at that and tell me something beautiful isn't worth a little danger." Neela watched lightning fork across the sky, illuminating the forest in a momentary flash of brilliant light. On Etheria, such displays would be considered atmospheric malfunction, requiring immediate correction. Here it was spectacular. "The forest near my birthplace had illumination patterns," she said, surprising herself with the personal disclosure. "Bioluminescent flora that pulsed in synchronized waves during the third moon's ascension. They were removed during infrastructure expansion." Finn glanced at her, something like sympathy crossing his features. "Sounds like you've lost some beauty in the name of efficiency, too." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the storm. Neela noticed how the rain transformed the landscape, deepening colors, creating new pathways as water flowed downhill, bringing forth scents from the earth she hadn't detected before. "I want to experience it," she decided suddenly. "The rain, it's coming down pretty hard." "Precisely. I wish to feel its unpredictability." Finn studied her for a moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. "Well, who am I to stand between a warrior and new experiences?" Minutes later, they stood on the deck, the overhang providing minimal shelter as Neela studied the curtain of water just steps away. She wore one of Finn's oversized shirts over her standard-issue bodysuit, the soft fabric hanging loose on her frame despite her height. "You sure about this?" Finn asked, eyebrows raised. "Your fancy Etherian tech might not appreciate a soaking." Neela removed the monitoring bracelet that transmitted her biometric data back to the collective. "Some experiences are not meant for official records," she said, placing it carefully inside. Then, without hesitation, she stepped into the downpour. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, cold water striking her skin from all directions, soaking through fabric, plastering her short silver-blue hair to her scalp. Neela spread her arms wide, tilting her face toward the sky, allowing the rain to stream over her features. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin flared in response, pulsing with bright cobalt light that shone through her wet clothing. She turned to find Finn watching her, still sheltered under the overhang, an unreadable expression on his face. "You're glowing," he said, voice barely audible over the rain. "Autonomic response," she explained. "Heightened sensation triggers bioluminescence." "It's beautiful." The simple statement caught her off guard. Beauty was not a concept applied to warriors in the collective. Efficiency, lethality, precision, these were the qualities valued in her caste. Beauty belonged to the aesthetic divisions, those bred for diplomacy and ceremony. "You should join me," she called, surprising herself again. "Experience the unpredictability." Finn hesitated only briefly before stepping into the rain beside her. Water immediately darkened his hair and soaked his clothing, but he laughed, a sound Neela had heard rarely during her stay. "Been a while since I played in the rain," he admitted, blinking water from his eyes. Neela didn't fully understand the concept of playing, but something about the freedom of the moment, the shared experience of sensation without purpose or efficiency, resonated deeply. On impulse, she splashed her foot in a puddle, sending water arcing toward Finn. He froze, droplets streaming down his surprised face, before his expression shifted to something challenging. "Oh, it's like that, is it?" What followed was an education in human water recreation, splashing, impromptu puddle jumping, and something Finn called rain dancing, that involved spinning with arms outstretched until dizziness set in. Neela's warrior reflexes gave her certain advantages, but Finn's familiarity with the concept of play evened the field. By the time they retreated inside, both were thoroughly soaked, and to Neela's surprise, she was breathless with something approximating laughter, a sound she couldn't remember making since early childhood, before her training began. "You should do that more often," Finn said, tossing her a dry cloth for her hair. "Get wet. Laugh, it suits you." Neela felt an unfamiliar warmth that had nothing to do with the tea Finn, prepared to ward off the chill. The incident in the rain marked a turning point. Neela began to approach her time on Earth differently, not as punishment to be endured, but as an opportunity to experience sensations and emotions long suppressed by her training. Finn, seemingly sensing this shift, began introducing her to more Earth experiences. They hiked forest trails where Neela marveled at the chaotic yet harmonious growth patterns of unregulated plant life. They visited a small settlement, town, Finn corrected, where Neela observed humans interacting in bewildering but fascinating ways. Each experience was cataloged, analyzed, and increasingly simply enjoyed. Finn, too, was changing. The quiet, reserved human who had greeted her upon arrival smiled more frequently now. He spoke of his past more openly, his work in search and rescue, the satisfaction of saving lives, and eventually, the tragedy that had led him to retreat from that world. "We were caught in an avalanche," he explained one evening as they sat before the heating unit Finn called a fireplace. "Standard rescue operation turned nightmare. I got out. My partner didn't." "It wasn't your decision," Neela said, recognizing the shadow of guilt that crossed his features. "No, but I was team lead. The responsibility was mine." He stared into the flames. "After that, I couldn't trust myself with other people's lives anymore, so I switched to logistics, still helping, just from a distance." Neela understood this better than most. "Among my people, failure in duty is unforgivable, but your failure was caring too much, not too little. There is honor in that." Finn looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing something new. "Sometimes I forget you're a warrior under all that blue." "I am always a warrior," she replied, but perhaps not only a warrior. The admission hung between them, significant in ways Neela couldn't fully articulate. Their days fell into a rhythm unlike anything Neela had experienced, unpredictable yet comfortable, structured yet fluid. Mornings began with parallel exercise routines, Finn with his earth calisthenics, Neela with her combat forms. They prepared and consumed the morning meal together before Finn departed for work. During his absence, Neela explored the surrounding forest, studied earth transmissions, and increasingly, experimented with activities purely for pleasure, reading fictional narratives, attempting to reproduce music on Finn's old stringed instrument, even cultivating small plants in containers near the dwelling's southern exposure. Evenings became a time of exchange. Finn introduced her to earth entertainment, visual narratives, games of strategy and chance. Neela shared sanitized stories of her missions, careful to omit any information that might violate collective security protocols. They discussed differences and, increasingly, similarities between their worlds. "Your collective doesn't sound so different from some human governments," Finn observed one evening. "Just more organized about their control." "The difference," Neela replied, "is that humans question authority. Your history is filled with revolutions and reforms. And yours isn't." She hesitated. "There were movements in our early development. They were deemed dysfunctional and corrected." "Corrected," Finn repeated, his tone making the words sound darker than Neela had intended. "And no one fights back anymore." The question bordered on sedition by collective standards, yet Neela found herself answering honestly. "Some do. They disappear into rehabilitation." Finn's expression hardened. "And you're okay with that system?" "I was born to it. Questioning it was, not encouraged." "Until you refused that order." He leaned forward. "What made you different, Neela? Why did you stand up when others wouldn't?" She had asked herself this question many times since her disgrace. "I saw their faces, the nomads we were ordered to eliminate. One was holding a juvenile of their species. The young one was playing." She met Finn's gaze. "I realized I was about to end something I didn't understand, something that might have value beyond my comprehension." Finn nodded slowly. "Empathy, that's what they're really afraid of, isn't it? Not emotion itself, but the power of understanding others." The insight resonated uncomfortably. Empathy was indeed considered a dangerous trait among warrior castes, a potential weakness to be eliminated through training and, if necessary, neural adjustment. Yet here she was, developing connections, experiencing concern for another being's welfare without strategic purpose. "This assignment was meant to humiliate me," she said quietly, "to prove how primitive human emotions make you vulnerable and inefficient. Instead," she trailed off, uncertain how to complete the thought. "Instead, you're finding out we might not be so primitive after all," Finn suggested. "I'm finding that perhaps efficiency isn't the highest virtue," she corrected. "That connection has value beyond tactical advantage." The revelation should have alarmed her. It certainly would alarm her superiors if they knew. But instead, it felt like truth finally acknowledged. Later that night, as Neela performed her evening meditation, her monitoring bracelet signaled an incoming transmission. The small holographic display showed Officer Jevik's face, his expression typically severe. "Progress report, Guardian Neela. The Council requests detailed analysis of your integration experiment." She maintained a neutral expression. "Integration proceeds according to parameters. The human subject is cooperative. I am gathering extensive data on domestic patterns." "Your biometric readings show irregularities," Jevik said, eyes narrowing. "Elevated endorphins, oxytocin spikes, prolonged periods of accelerated heart rate." "Earth's atmosphere contains higher oxygen levels than our standard," she lied smoothly. "Physical adjustments continue." Jevik seemed unconvinced. "Remember your purpose, Neela. This assignment tests your ability to follow protocol after your lapse. The Council is watching closely." "I am aware of my obligations." "See that you remain so. 15 more cycles, then extraction. Don't become attached to these primitives." The transmission ended, leaving Neela staring at the blank display. 15 cycles. Just over 2 Earth weeks before she would return to Etheria, to the sterile environments and rigid hierarchies of the collective. For the first time since her arrival, the thought brought no relief. "Earth to Neela," Finn's voice broke through her contemplation. You've been staring at that tree for 10 minutes. They were following a trail near a water feature fin called the creek, the afternoon sun filtering through the canopy above. Neela blinked, refocusing on her surroundings. I was considering vegetative growth patterns, she said, the lie coming easily. Right, and I'm secretly the president. Finn stepped closer. Something's bothering you, has been since yesterday. Neela was continually surprised by his perceptiveness. For all the collective's dismissal of human intelligence, Finn noticed details many of her own kind would miss. I received communication from my superiors, she admitted. A reminder of my temporary status here. Understanding crossed his features. Ah, the 30-day deadline, we're halfway there, huh? Correct. They walked in silence for several minutes, the only sound the rushing water nearby and occasional calls of Earth avians. What happens when you go back? Finn finally asked. Reassignment, likely to a remote outpost. My status will remain probationary for at least one cycle, approximately 3 Earth years. And if you don't go back? The question was so unexpected, so contrary to every assumption Neela had made that she stopped walking entirely. Not return? That isn't possible. Why not? Finn's expression was serious. People defect all the time. I am not people. I am Etherian. The collective does not permit defection. Earth has asylum laws, even for non-humans. Neela stared at him, trying to comprehend what he was suggesting. Remain on Earth. Abandon her people, her duty, everything she had known. The concept was so alien she could barely process it. Why would you suggest such a thing? She asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Finn looked away, suddenly seeming uncomfortable. Just thinking out loud, you seem different here, happier maybe. I thought perhaps you might want that to continue. Happiness is not a consideration in duty, she replied automatically, but the words felt hollow. Maybe it should be. He glanced at her, something vulnerable in his expression. Maybe some people deserve to be happy, even warriors. Before she could respond, a crack of thunder split the air, much closer than the storm warranted, followed by a sound like tearing fabric. The sky above them rippled, and a familiar sensation washed over Neela. Translocation energy. Get down, she shouted, pushing Finn toward the cover of nearby vegetation just as a beam of pale light cut through the disturbance, striking the ground where they had stood. Hovering above the creek was an Etherian scout vessel, its weapons system active and targeting. What the hell is that? Finn gasped. Collective enforcement, Neela replied grimly, her warrior instincts fully engaged. They're not supposed to be here. Another energy beam sliced through the air, vaporizing a tree meters from their position. Neela's mind raced through scenarios, calculating odds and outcomes with trained precision. We need to reach your dwelling, she said. My communication device can signal diplomatic channels. That's 2 miles back, Finn protested. The scout vessel adjusted position, its sensors sweeping the area. Neela knew they had moments before they were located. Then we run, she said, grabbing his hand. Now. As they fled through the forest, energy beams carving destruction behind them, Neela realized with startling clarity that this wasn't just an enforcement action. This was a message, one meant specifically for her. The collective wasn't just watching, they were intervening, and they had decided 15 more cycles was too long to wait. Her temporary respite on Earth was coming to an end, one way or another. They ran through the forest, ducking beneath branches and leaping over fallen logs. Neela could have easily outpaced Finn with her enhanced physiology, but she remained by his side, pulling him forward when he faltered, guiding him through the underbrush. This makes no sense, she said as they paused behind a large boulder, the scout vessel's engines humming somewhere above the canopy. Enforcement vessels are not authorized in Earth airspace. Finn was breathing hard, sweat beading on his forehead. Maybe they're not playing by the rules anymore. The realization hit her with disturbing clarity. Or perhaps they never were. Another energy beam sliced through the trees nearby, sending splinters flying. Neela pulled Finn lower, shielding him with her body. The gesture came without thought. Protect the human, protect Finn. We can't outrun them all the way back to the cabin, Finn whispered. We need another plan. Neela's trained mind rapidly assessed their options. The vessel appears to be a T-class scout. Limited crew, typically automated. It relies on thermal tracking to locate biological signatures. English, please. It's hunting our body heat. Finn nodded, understanding dawning. The creek, water can mask thermal signatures. Yes, but not indefinitely. We need a distraction. They moved carefully toward the water, staying low and using the densest vegetation as cover. The creek was shallow but fast-moving, the water numbingly cold. Finn winced as they waded in. What kind of distraction did you have in mind? He asked through chattering teeth. Neela reached for the monitoring bracelet on her wrist, her connection to the collective, the device that had tracked her every vital sign since her arrival on Earth. She removed it, studying its blinking lights for a moment. This contains a transceiver that broadcasts my biometric data, if properly modified. She pried open the sleek metal casing, exposing delicate circuitry within. With precise movements, she rearranged several components, then sealed it again. What did you do? Overloaded the power cell and reversed the signal polarity. It will emit a thermal signature approximately 4 times stronger than an Etherian life form for approximately 6 minutes before burning out. Finn raised an eyebrow. Since when do diplomats know how to hack alien tech? I am not a diplomat, Neela reminded him. I am a warrior. Technical adaptation is part of our training. She waded to the edge of the creek, calculating trajectories. When I throw this, we move downstream as quickly and quietly as possible. The vessel will follow the stronger signal. Finn nodded, and Neela launched the bracelet with perfect precision, sending it arcing through the air to land deep in the forest in the opposite direction from the cabin. Almost immediately, the scout vessel's engines changed pitch as it altered course to pursue the new signal. They moved swiftly through the water, staying low, letting the current help carry them downstream. Neela kept her hand on Finn's arm, steadying him against the slippery rocks. For 20 minutes they traveled this way, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers before finally climbing out on the opposite bank. We're still over a mile from the cabin, Finn said, shivering slightly in his wet clothes. And we're on the wrong side of the creek. There's a crossing point half a kilometer downstream, Neela replied. We'll circle back. As they moved through the forest, Neela remained hyper-aware of their surroundings, every sense alert for signs of pursuit. The scout vessel had not reappeared, but she knew better than to assume they were safe. Why would they come after you? Finn asked as they walked. You've only been here 2 weeks. What changed? Neela considered the question carefully. I suspect my communications with Officer Jevic raised concerns. Perhaps my biometric data indicated irregularities. Irregularities like what? She glanced at him. Elevated endorphins, increased oxytocin, physiological responses inconsistent with a warrior's training. In human terms, happiness, attachment, she paused, emotional involvement. Understanding crossed Finn's features. They attacked us because you're enjoying yourself too much, because we're friends. The words seemed inadequate for what had developed between them, but Neela didn't correct him. The collective maintains strict control over warrior castes. Emotional connections are considered contamination, weakness that could compromise duty. That's insane, Finn muttered. That is control, Neela countered. My assignment was meant to demonstrate human emotional weakness, not for me to adopt it. They walked in silence for several minutes, the only sounds their footsteps on the forest floor and distant birdsong. The scout vessel seemed to have disappeared, but Neela remained vigilant. So what happens now? Finn finally asked. They know where you are, they'll come back. Yes, she admitted. I must contact Earth's diplomatic channels, report the incursion. This violated multiple treaty agreements. And then? Neela hesitated. Then, I don't know. It was perhaps the first time in her life she had spoken those words. Warriors always knew, or at least, they were trained to project certainty even in uncertainty. But now everything felt unmoored, adrift. They reached the cabin as dusk fell, the forest growing darker around them. No sign of pursuit had emerged, but Neela insisted on security measures, closing all transparencies, minimizing light emissions, establishing makeshift perimeters with items from Finn's equipment shed. You've done this before, Finn observed as she arranged sensor triggers around the cabin's exterior. Standard defensive protocol, she replied. These are crude approximations, but they'll alert us to approaching vessels. When they finally entered the cabin, exhaustion descended upon them both. Adrenaline, or its Etherian equivalent, had sustained Neela through their escape, but now her body demanded rest. Finn looked even more drained, his face pale beneath his tan. "You should change into dry attire," she told him. "Hypothermia is a risk for humans." "What about you?" "Etherian physiology regulates temperature more efficiently." Nevertheless, she accepted the dry clothing he offered, another of his soft shirts and loose-fitting pants. They changed in separate rooms, then met in the main living area. Finn had lit a fire in the hearth, the warmth and light a comfort despite the security risk. He handed her a steaming mug of tea. "So," he said, settling onto the couch, "those are your people, huh?" "Yes. Not big on diplomacy." Despite everything, Neela felt her lips curve slightly. "No. And they're watching you, tracking you, ready to shoot at you if you start feeling too much." She nodded, sipping the tea. "And you still want to go back to them?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Neela stared into the fire, watching the flames dance in patterns no Etherian would allow, beautiful, unpredictable, dangerous. "I have never known anything else," she finally said. "The collective is my people, my purpose." "Purpose isn't the same as belonging," Finn said quietly. "You can have purpose anywhere, belonging, that's rarer." His words resonated with something deep within her, something that had been growing since her arrival on Earth. A sense that perhaps duty wasn't enough, that there might be more to existence than efficiency and control. "Where do you belong, Finn?" she asked. He looked around the cabin, his expression thoughtful. "Here, I guess, for now. After Myra, my search and rescue partner, died, I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere I could just be." He met her gaze. "But places aren't really where we belong, are they? It's people, connections." "The collective would disagree." "Yeah, well, the collective just tried to vaporize us, so maybe their philosophy has some flaws." Neela couldn't argue with that logic. She set down her mug and leaned back, allowing herself to fully feel the weariness in her muscles, the lingering cold from their time in the water, and beneath it all, a strange sense of clarity. "I contacted Earth's diplomatic channels while you were changing," she admitted. "Used your communication device. They're sending representatives to investigate the incursion." Finn nodded. "Good, then what?" "Then I will likely be recalled. The exchange program will be suspended. Relations between our worlds will become more formal." The thought should have brought relief, an end to this strange experiment, a return to the ordered existence she had known. Instead, it felt like loss. "And if you don't want to be recalled?" Finn asked, his voice careful, neutral. Neela looked at him, really looked at him. This human with his kind eyes and scarred hands. This man who had shown her rain and prepared food with care, who had listened to her stories and shared his own. Who had run with her, fought with her, protected her as she had protected him. "What I want has never been relevant," she said softly. "It is to me." 3 simple words, yet they carried such weight. In the collective, wanting was weakness. Desire was distraction, yet here in this moment her wants felt like the only truth that mattered. "I want," she began, then stopped, uncertain how to articulate feelings she had never been permitted to acknowledge, much less express. Finn moved closer, the couch shifting beneath his weight. "Tell me," he encouraged. "What do you want, Neela?" "To stay," she whispered. "To learn to feel," her words faltered. "To feel what?" "Everything." The admission felt like surrender and victory at once. "I want to feel everything this world has to offer, rain and warmth and taste and sound. I want to know what it means to choose rather than obey, to connect rather than control." Finn's expression softened. "And what about me? Where do I fit in all this feeling?" The question penetrated barriers Neela hadn't realized still existed. Walls built by years of training, of suppressing emotion, of denying anything beyond duty. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin began to glow, pulsing with her accelerated heartbeat. "You are," she searched for words adequate to describe what he had become to her. "You are the catalyst, the one who showed me possibility." Finn's hand reached for hers, warm fingers intertwining with her cooler ones. The contact sent a ripple of sensation through her, familiar yet still new. "Just a catalyst?" he asked, his voice lower, now intimate. "No," Neela admitted, "not just that." The space between them seemed to contract, the air charged with potential. Neela found herself studying his features with new intensity, the laugh lines around his eyes, the stubble darkening his jaw, the curve of his mouth. Human, yet not alien to her anymore. May I, she hesitated, unused to asking permission for anything. May I try something? Finn nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. Neela leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, tentative, exploratory. The sensation was electric, a current of warmth flowing between them. She had studied human customs, understood the concept of kissing, but no research had prepared her for the reality of it, the softness, the heat, the strange rightness of the connection. After a moment, she pulled back slightly, analyzing his reaction. Finn's eyes had darkened, his pulse visibly quickening at his throat. That was, he breathed. Unexpected, she suggested. Overdue, he corrected, and then his hand was cupping her face, drawing her back to him. This time the kiss deepened, his mouth moving against hers with greater intent, teaching her this new language of touch. Neela learned quickly, as she did with all things. Her hands found their way to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him beneath the soft fabric of his shirt. The bioluminescent patterns across her skin brightened, casting a blue glow that illuminated them both. When they finally parted, breathing faster, Finn traced a finger along one of the glowing patterns on her forearm. Beautiful, he murmured. No one had ever called her beautiful before. Warriors were not meant to be beautiful. They were meant to be efficient, deadly, controlled. Yet here, with this human, she was none of those things, and somehow more herself than she had ever been. This changes things, she said, her analytical mind never completely silent even in this moment. Good, Finn replied. Some things should change. He drew her closer, and she went willingly, allowing herself to be held in a way she had never experienced. His arms encircled her, warm and secure, her head finding a place on his shoulder as if it had always belonged there. They stayed that way for a long time, the fire crackling beside them, casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the forest was quiet, no sign of Etherian vessels or diplomatic representatives, just stillness and the gentle sounds of Earth's night. What happens tomorrow? Finn asked eventually, his voice rumbling against her ear. I don't know, Neela replied honestly, but tonight is ours. She lifted her head to look at him, allowing herself to feel the full force of her emotions. The connection, the desire, the strange new sensation she was beginning to recognize as joy. Tomorrow would bring complications, decisions, perhaps even danger. But tonight, in this moment, there was only this, two beings from different worlds finding something unexpected between them. This time when she kissed him, there was no hesitation, no analysis, only certainty, desire, and a wordless promise. Morning arrived with soft golden light filtering through the trees, illuminating the cabin interior. Neela woke first, her warrior's instincts still alert despite the comfort of Finn's bed. She lay still, watching the rise and fall of his chest as he slept, memorizing the peaceful expression on his face. Last night had been revelation, a discovery of sensation and emotion that no Etherian training had prepared her for. Her people viewed physical intimacy as either procreative necessity or tactical manipulation. They had never taught her it could be communion, conversation, connection expressed through touch and shared breath. Finn had been patient, gentle, guiding her through human customs of intimacy with the same care he'd shown teaching her about rain and music and the making of pancakes. And Neela, always a quick study, had found her body responding with unexpected intuition, as if some part of her had always known how to speak this language. Now in the quiet morning light, she studied the changes in herself, not just the lingering pleasant sensations in her body, but the profound shift in her consciousness. She had crossed a boundary, one the collective had established through generations of genetic engineering and psychological conditioning. Warriors did not form attachments. They did not experience intimate bonding. They certainly did not lie contentedly in bed beside aliens, watching them sleep. Yet here she was, and the expected shame, the programmed revulsion, was absent. In its place was a profound sense of rightness, of finally finding a truth her conditioning had obscured. Finn stirred beside her, eyes blinking open slowly. When he saw her watching him, a smile spread across his face, unguarded, genuine. Morning, he murmured. Good morning, she replied, the formal greeting feeling suddenly inadequate. His hand found hers beneath the covers, fingers intertwining. You're still here. Where else would I be? I don't know. I half expected to wake up and find you'd gone all warrior again, regretting human emotional contamination. She considered this possibility. I should, perhaps, by my people's standards, last night was— She searched for the appropriate term. Amazing, Finn suggested, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Treasonous, she corrected, but her lips curved upward. But also, yes, amazing. He leaned forward to press a kiss to her forehead. Any regrets? No, she realized with mild surprise. None. They remained in bed longer than efficiency would dictate, speaking in quiet voices about everything and nothing. Finn's childhood memories of ocean waves, Neela's secret fascination with interstellar phenomena, shared observations about the differences in their perceptions of taste and color and sound. Eventually, reality reasserted itself in the form of Finn's communication device signaling an incoming message. He retrieved it reluctantly, scanning the text with a frown. Earth Diplomatic Corps, he informed her. They'll be here in 2 hours. They're bringing representatives from the Etherian embassy. Neela sat up, the pleasant haze of the morning dissipating. Then we have decisions to make. Finn nodded, his expression serious. We do. She rose from the bed, gathering her clothing with practiced efficiency. As she dressed, she felt Finn's eyes on her, not with the heat of desire now, but with concern. Whatever happens, he said, know that I'm with you, whatever you decide. The words warmed something deep within her, even as her tactical mind began formulating scenarios, contingencies, responses to the coming confrontation. They will try to take me back, she said as they shared a hasty breakfast. The collective does not relinquish assets easily, particularly ones who have become compromised. Are you, Finn asked, compromised? She met his gaze steadily. By their standards, irrevocably. By mine, she paused, searching for truth. By mine, I am more complete than I have ever been. He reached across the table to take her hand. Then that's what matters. They spent the remaining time preparing, not with weapons or defenses, but with information. Neela briefed Finn on Etherian diplomatic protocols, on the likely representatives who would be sent, on the legal complexities of her situation. Finn, in turn, shared what he knew of Earth's asylum procedures, of interspecies treaties, of human rights that might be extended to a non-human seeking refuge. When the distinctive hum of approaching vehicles reached them, they were ready, standing together on the cabin's porch, hands clasped between them, facing whatever would come not as warrior and human, but as partners. 3 vehicles arrived, 2 bearing Earth Diplomatic Corps insignia, 1 sleek and silver with the geometric patterns of Etherian design. They parked in the clearing before the cabin, and various officials emerged. From the Etherian vehicle stepped a familiar figure, Officer Jevic, his 4 eyes immediately finding Neela, narrowing at the sight of her hand in Finn's. Guardian Neela, he called, his voice carrying the formal tones of official address. You will report for immediate extraction and decontamination. Neela felt Finn's hand tighten around hers, but before either could respond, one of the Earth officials stepped forward, a tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Let's all take a step back, she said firmly. I'm Director Harlow, Earth Diplomatic Corps. We're here to investigate reports of an unauthorized Etherian military presence in Earth airspace in violation of the Sol System Non-Aggression Treaty. Any Etherian presence was authorized pursuit of collective property, Jevic countered smoothly. Guardian Neela's extraction is an internal matter. Personnel are not property, Director Harlow replied, her tone cool. And extraction requires proper diplomatic channels, which were not followed. Furthermore, we have evidence of weapons discharge in a protected forest zone. As the officials argued jurisdiction and protocols, Neela observed something unexpected, doubt in Jevic's posture, hesitation in his responses. The collective representative was on uncertain ground, aware that diplomatic incident was rapidly becoming diplomatic crisis. She stepped forward, still holding Finn's hand. I wish to formally request asylum, she announced, her voice clear and carrying. Under Earth Interspecies Protection Act, Section 17. The clearing fell silent. Director Harlow's eyebrows raised slightly, but she recovered quickly. On what grounds? Persecution based on neurodevelopmental variants, Neela replied, using the formal language she had researched that morning. The collective's treatment of emotional capacity as defect rather than diversity constitutes targeted oppression. Jevik's skin paled to a sickly gray. This is preposterous. Guardian Neela is experiencing temporary mental instability due to environmental contamination. I am experiencing clarity, Neela corrected, for perhaps the first time. Director Harlow studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Request noted. This matter will require formal review and hearing. She will return with us now, Jevik insisted. Any disputes can be addressed through proper channels. That's not how asylum works, Finn spoke up, his voice steady despite the tension. Once requested, removal is prohibited pending review. Jevik's eyes narrowed dangerously. You, human, you have no standing in this matter. Actually, Director Harlow interjected, as the host of record for the exchange protocol, Mr. Walker has significant standing. Furthermore, as Earth's representative, I am invoking protective custody pending formal asylum proceedings. The standoff stretched for several tense moments before Jevik inclined his head, not in acceptance, but in temporary retreat. The collective will expect formal diplomatic resolution within standard procedural timeframes. Of course, Director Harlow agreed smoothly. In the meantime, Guardian Neela will remain under Earth protection. As the officials continued to discuss procedural matters, Neela turned to Finn. This is only beginning, she said quietly. The collective will not relinquish me easily. Good thing you're not alone anymore, he replied. She looked at this human who had changed everything, who had shown her rain and music and warmth, who had awakened feelings no genetic engineering could fully suppress, who stood beside her now as she defied everything she had been taught to be. No, she agreed, feeling an unfamiliar yet welcome sensation expanding in her chest, something her people had no word for but humans called hope. I am not alone.